Hello and welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us on today's webinar on private network, reliable and scalable connectivity strategies. We would like to thank you all, and we would also like to thank all our sponsors and partners, GXC, Intel, Dell Technologies, and Dejero. Joining us today are Hitesh Solanki, he is Head of Product Management at GXC. Manav Bhalla, he is a Sales Director at Intel. Greg Burrell, he is Federal Alliance Manager at Dell Technologies. Jahan Karim, he is a Global Director for Business Development at Dejero. Kevin Ferrandis, unfortunately, was not able to join, so we're really thankful that Jahan joined us today. I'm Hema Kadia. I will be the moderator and host for today's webinar. With that, let's start with the current. Before I continue, there are 2 points I would like to make. We are going to conduct poll throughout this webinar, and we will have at least 10 to 15 minutes of Q&A session at the end of the webinar. Let's start with the current state of private networks. So if you look in 2023, there were almost 3,000 private 5G and LTE network deployments, some of them in production phase, some of them in POC phase, some of them in trial phase. When we look at the forecast for 2028, this number is expected to increase to 60,000 networks. From revenue projections perspective, in 2023, there was almost a 1 billion spent on network. In 2028, it is expected that the total addressable market is going to be approximately 21 billion as per the industry analyst reports. When we look at the mix of connectivity technologies, then in 2023, almost 54% of the private networks leverage private LTE, 24% leverage private 5G, and a blend of private 5G and private LTE was leveraged in 20% of the deployments. When we look at the forecast for 2028, it is expected that the private 5G deployments are almost going to double. Still, a substantial number of deployments will still continue to leverage private LTE. When we look at the key sectors that are leveraging and benefiting from private networks, manufacturing, mining, transport and logistics, energy and utilities, and education are some of the key sectors. When we look at where are the largest deployments, US and Europe are leading, but we also see a very good momentum in APAC. Now, when we consider deploying private networks in the enterprise environment, there are always going to be multiple technologies. So what should be the key considerations when deciding whether to deploy private 5G or LTE? The first being the reliability. Are your critical applications facing connectivity challenges? In that case, private 5G and LTE will help to address those reliability issues and address your continuous service requirement. The second being flexibility. How is your environment? Is there going to be dynamic changes in the environment? If so, then private 5G and LTE can help to address those needs, can provide the flexibility, and can provide both modular and adaptable network. Third being scalability. Is your connectivity infrastructure facing scalability challenges? If so, private 5G and LTE can address those specific scalability issues. The next being performance. So you need to identify for your critical business applications and use cases what is the bandwidth, latency, and performance requirements, and determine if private 5G and LTE are the solution to address those requirements. From a security perspective, when you consider adding a security solution in your private network environments, there are multiple things that you need to take into account. Not only your private 5G and LTE network, but what are the connectivity technologies you're already deployed in your network, the IoT devices, the visibility of the IoT devices, the visibility and monitoring of the devices, and so on. The other key important factor would be the cost effective. You need to prioritize those initiatives where you will have the highest return on investment and would see maximum operational benefits or improvements. The other key factor would be resilience. You need to consider adding redundant connectivity technology layers for your critical applications to ensure continuity of the service. Last but not least, sustainability. When bringing in private 5G and LTE solutions, you need to ensure that the equipment and the solutions are energy efficient. First panelist, Hitesh Solanki, please take away.
Thank you. Yes. Good morning, everybody. Good evening, and good afternoon as well, depending on what part of the world you're joining us from. We truly appreciate the few moments that you're going to spare with us. And Hema, thank you very much once again for setting us up with this amazing panel. We've got some really interesting conversations lined up ahead. I would like to begin with the challenges for enterprise networks. I read something the other day and it resonated with me is that when we talk about running a business, we have all kinds of challenges, all kinds of issues, but the one key thing that really makes a difference between, usually between success and failure is time. And it's a quantity, it's a resource that is not in our control. We cannot really bring back time that is lost, and we cannot really accelerate time to move faster through, rough times so that we can get to the success. But what we can do is control our actions and how our business is supported and how we are supporting our business. Some of the other networking challenges that over here that shown up over here on this slide are, really coverage related. So it's like a peeling the onion exercise. If you start with time as a big entity, big nebulous thing that we cannot control, but then look into the other subtle problems and you start drilling down into, asking the question why 5 times. There are various strategies of doing that. We typically find that it boils down to a flavor of one of these 6 things that I've mentioned over here, especially coming from an enterprise perspective, right? Like when you're trying to do a business, run a business, there's inputs that you need to put into the business, there are outcomes and outputs that you need to really make sure are favorable and helping you achieve your goals. So wireless connectivity is kind of becoming that ubiquitous platform or like a base need or a core need of running a business that during the pandemic, every business became an online business. Post-pandemic, this is like the new mantra where everybody is talking about AI and everybody is talking about compute and you know trying to solve tough problems with machine learning and artificial intelligence. You still miss the very core, real sharp sort of edges of what your network is able, what your business is able to do, and why is it not able to run faster. It kind of boils down to one of these challenges. You have coverage issues, you have data losses, you could have any kind of operational inefficiencies that surface up that you could say, if I only had reliable, secure network, I could actually think about doing this something slightly differently. Next slide, please. And so what I want to share here on this one is specific examples instead of arm waving around. There is a problem and there is a nebulous problem. I want to talk about a use case and a business case that we kind of stepped in as a partner, as a solution provider to one of our customers, and really showed them the tangible dollar figure that they could be, that they could take and roll it up into their profits. We actually helped them save on their operational expenses $6.5 million year over year. And as the slide lays it out, there was a specific business problem. It was a large enterprise, massive amount of outdoor and indoor coverage capacity required. Didn't really have anything in our homes, in our privileged life that we live in, where we have Wi-Fi that works like fourth utility. You switch on a button and it's always there. You don't even have to switch on a button sometimes. It's usually just always there. Not the same situation when you go into the rural areas of the country. Sometimes when you travel far out, you experience that. Imagine running a business in a deprived environment like that, right? That's basically this customer. They needed the connectivity to use their scanners. They invested quite a bit. They bought new gadgets, new scanners, tablets became reasonably inexpensive to kind of go get hold of. And they did all of the right things, but only to realize that Wi-Fi that they thought was extremely well incorporated or in, covered areas in residential areas and offices that had good infrastructure does nothing outdoors once you go outdoors because the physics just doesn't let you do that. Our solution, handful of access points in comparison to Wi-Fi access points that spoke cellular communication languages. We masked it all from them. All they really needed to know is that we're going to come in at 1/4 or 1/5 the number of actual hardware access points that are going to be installed. And they're going to pay about, upwards of about $200,000 for a 3-year ownership of that network. And every single device that they bought and all of the use cases that they had in mind, which were actually going to generate business outcomes from them for them, resulting into manual labor saving, resulting into all kinds of efficiency and optimization exercises. They were able to kind of gradually shift into that domain, and we worked with them to figure out what was that in terms of savings. And the number right there is 6.5 million is a substantial number carried out on basis of certain labor charges and certain other expenses that they were sharing with us. Next slide, please. And so how did we do that? Well, we used our hero product called Onyx. So Onyx, as I was showing over here, is our brand name for a private cellular network solution. We bring in an end-to-end solution. We come in as consultants to the problem for our customers. We understand what they're really trying to achieve, and we try to see if it's a good fit for what we have as a product offering. We have a few, we'll get into the details of that, but the core highlights that we kind of bring to the table is you come to us and we are your one-stop shop. You don't have to shuffle around trying to fix things, put things together, and create your own solution. We did that. We engineered it in-house so that you as a customer do not have to do that, right? It's a complete software that brings your solution, brings your environment with wireless coverage from day 0, day 1, and day 2 perspective. What I mean by that is initial design, consultation, what you're going to need, how are we going to place it, what's the before and after going to look like, the design phase of it, the day 1, which is the actual configuration, where we actually put the solution in place and light it up for you with our professional installers on site. And day 2 is teach you or show you how do you get the most out of the network that you've deployed. The day 2 management includes KPIs and analytics. It includes all kinds of changes in configuration, additions, if you will, if you wanted to expand the network and get into other areas. And lastly, we have a hero product that doesn't really show up anywhere else in any conversations other than our discussions with our customers, which is the industry's first cellular mesh node. When I say industry first, it's not, we've been using mesh technology in in wireless technology or Wi-Fi technology, but the adoption of that same principle or that same idea that you can actually put up a cell tower without dragging a cable to it, even a power cable, mind you, is the industry first one. Our CTO and co-founder, Hardik Jain, he has patents around that. Him and his team worked really, really hard in the initial days of our company to build this valuable asset that we have in our back pocket. And there have been so many conversations that open up just because we can actually promise them that you can now have private cellular coverage in areas and locations that you couldn't even think about putting any kind of cables because they were cost prohibitive, because there were standards, safety standards, etc., that you couldn't use to deploy the cellular coverage there. Next slide, please. And so all-inclusive pictorial view, a picture speaks 1,000 words. So I could keep going on and on about what we include, but this gives you a lay of the land, right? We've got access points that the first 3 are the actual outdoor and indoor access points. The last one towards the black compute platform is actually the mesh node. They, in form factor, are very similar to each other. They look very similar and performance-wise also are very similar. It's the intellectual property that I mentioned earlier. In the middle is our compute platform. It comes in a few variations, and the one that I'm showing here is actually the one that goes into a portable box. And on the right-hand side is the actual management system, along with a SIM card, as well as a subscription from the Spectrum services. So, and underneath that, as you can see, all of these industrial use cases, as well as other technologies, can actually be partners to a private cellular network. And I'm going to show another slide, which will talk about us as a platform, as an enabler, because we facilitate all kinds of connectivity solutions to germinate from the solution that is called the private cellular network, because it's the basis for everything that you want to do as a business moving upwards. Next slide, please. So just very quickly double clicking again on the mesh technology. I know it was a lot to kind of digest in the previous slide, but this is where I zoom into it. And I want to show you exactly how the lay of the land looks like, right? It's got the compute platform. There's an outdoor access point that's connected with a wired node or with a wired cable to the compute platform. And then you have a cellular signal coming out of that access point, which is a 4G or a 5G signal, what have you, that feeds in wirelessly as an input to the actual mesh node over here. And the mesh node can then do its magic, clean up the signal, make it stronger, better, faster for the devices that are going to be connected to that particular access point that's connected to the mesh node. By doing this, we give you about 1.5 to 2 miles for one mesh node between the end user device and the actual compute platform. You can actually daisy chain this and have another mesh node at the far end of it, and that would let you do double the distance wirelessly. Again, This thing can power up using a battery and a solar panel out in the middle of the field, out in the middle of, places where you cannot drag cables. And that is a unique value proposition that we have. Give me 1 second. Something is buzzing. Next slide, please. The value pyramid. This is the one that I was talking about earlier. I'm going to go a minute over my time, but I think it's important to talk about this. We see ourselves as a base level at which we come in and talk about our products and talk about our solutions as something that our customers can use to facilitate everything that goes on top of it. And our customers really see the value in the top green pyramid, where they actually can think of doing the applications and the digital transformation that they've been talking about since number of years. We've actually met customers that invested heavily in those software licenses, only to realize that what they thought was going to be a solution for all of their issues and problems just doesn't do anything, because there is no wireless coverage that can actually let them run with it. Imagining spending, thousands of dollars on a license fee on a software that sits on a tablet, but you would have to physically walk back and forth from your actual, field work where it's needed to the carpeted area where there is Wi-Fi, just so that you can upload the data once you're done with it. So we've partnered with our partners that are going to be, talking about their stuff pretty soon here, but these are just a subset of our partners, right? We have ecosystem partners that work with us for network devices. We have ecosystem partners that work with us for actual applications. There are additional features and enhancements that are constantly being developed, and we have partners to help us do that. The net out of it is we come in at the base level to take care of the hard stuff with our proprietary hardware and software, and facilitate conversations that bring up to the highest value of installing a particular network to our customers. Next slide, please. And this is exactly what I was talking about earlier. We know that this is not a zero-sum game. Private networks has had a great start, and then it kind of slowed down on adoption side of things. There's various entities around the globe talking about it, and things are opening up even more. Just yesterday, I was on a webinar that's still in the hush-hush, but there are some massively amazing changes coming on the positive side for what the US and the CBRS can actually, coverage-wise and capacity-wise can mean for our partners as well as customers. So we really build strong bonds with our partners. Go-to-market partners are folks that think like us, that have the same understanding of the problem space, and want to actually bring in a holistic solution to our customers. And we focus predominantly on the Industry 4.0. The reason for that being, we think Wi-Fi does great when it works and when it's available. We don't want to go up against that, but we want to find out niche opportunities that Wi-Fi struggles, and the external entities or the big networks that are available out there are not customized enough or flexible enough to address the business needs. Why should the business suffer? Our partners and us feel that we can actually come together and help our customers out so that they can really, leverage all of the technology advancements that have happened in the past 5 years in the United States. Next slide, please. We can skip this one. It's repeating the same message, but it's a highlight here that I've been privileged to join, big name companies like Intel, Dell, Dejero, to help resonate the same message that we have and push through to get to our customers and solve their problems together. I believe that should be the end of my slides.
Thank you, Hitesh. Let me launch the poll that I was supposed to share earlier. We would have almost like 45 seconds to 60 seconds for this poll. Appreciate your inputs, participants. Let me transfer the control to Manav. Manav, please take away.
Hi, thank you, Hema. Hello, everyone. So I want to talk about Intel's role in private 5G. So to adequately answer that question, what's Intel's role in private networks? It's important to look at first how the landscape of networks has evolved. If you go back historically and look at macro networks, operators would deploy large nationwide networks, and these were the ones that were driving the use cases, which were primarily consumer focused, and they comprised of phones and tablets and so on. Now, in the case of private networks, this is not true. The impetus for driving private networks is really that enterprises need to solve a business problem. And from that, they identify which use case could solve that problem. And ultimately, the solution can be serviced by connectivity. Often it's P5G, and we saw Hitesh showed in one of his slides that a HETNET type scenario is possible where you may have a complement of Wi-Fi, of LoRa, but also 4G or 5G. So what we see is that connectivity is just an enabler in P5G networks. Another critical component is the ecosystem. Now, again, Hitesh mentioned that to adequately solve a business problem with the right use cases, you need to really complement the connectivity with things such as edge applications and endpoint devices. Now, Intel has a very rich partner ecosystem. We work closely with the three companies here, but we have an extensive partner ecosystem. That ecosystem also leads us to have a very extensive list of vertical specific use cases, edge applications. And in turn, all of this feeds into our market-ready solutions, RFP-ready kits, and we have various programs that allow our partners to showcase their solutions, things such as Intel Network Builders. So having this rich ecosystem has allowed us to have over 30,000 unique deployments since 2018. And below, I represent a block diagram of what I see as the large components of private networks. And really, the point I want to make is that Intel plays across that. So people often have this perception that Intel is just a chip provider, but that's certainly not true. Even in the case of GXE, they're a partner of ours. They use our FlexRAN software. They use our chips, whether Xeons or network controllers. But then the point I want to make is, again, in this case, if you see, we work with them on application partners. We work with them on the FlexRAN. So really, Intel's role is much beyond the chips. Next slide, please. So we saw in the previous slide that Intel works across the ecosystem, but it's important to consider what are the benefits for an enterprise, right? Take the other approach. If they take an end-to-end approach and work across the ecosystem, what do you get out of that? So as you would have heard from Hitesh and also from other partners, that really enterprises want solutions that are easy to deploy and offer flexibility. So taking an end-to-end approach really enables this from offering flexibility when it comes to technology, business, or commercial models. Now, what do I mean by that? So if you look at a technology perspective, verticals for enterprises service different verticals and they have different sizes. So it's not a one size fits all. Some may have a legacy Wi-Fi network deployed. Some may have some 4G devices already in place. So you really need flexibility, and having a rigid solution doesn't work. Also spectrum, right? So in the US, we're lucky enough, we have CBRS, but there's other parts of the world that don't have CBRS. So really you need to be able to work with operators. And then also node placement, right? Now this in turn takes me to the next point, which is the business model. Again, depending on the size or the needs of an enterprise, they may want 100% on-prem, 100% private network, but then there may be scenarios where a hybrid solution is more appropriate, where the RAN is maybe deployed on site and then the core is in the cloud. Or an enterprise may be quite small in size, can't afford the CapEx and OpEx, but still want to leverage a private network. So in this scenario, maybe a multi-tenant type solution would be more appropriate. Now, having that flexibility really allows really unique commercial models to be engaged, right? So large enterprises may want, hey, we want a CapEx heavy solution. So we want to just pay for something outright and then have very minimal OpEx. But then, other enterprises may prefer an OpEx only model, which allows them to save valuable CapEx. So pay as you go as a service. Some may say, hey, we want you to put some skin in the game. So identify an outcome and say, when we meet those outcomes, we will pay you. Or someone may just want something very simple like, hey, the number of devices is how we will pay. So today we have 100. When we get the next 100, we'll pay you the next tranche of money. So the benefit from taking this end-to-end approach is that it allows enterprises to really achieve the outcomes that they're after and the benefits while really simplifying operations. Next slide, please. So then the question becomes, why Intel, right? So if you look historically, Intel was a big proponent in the shift from legacy networks to open networks. So macro networks If you go back, I mean, I've been in the game since 2G days, but we used to have large, legacy appliances that are very purpose built. But now we have a scenario which is, VNFs and cloud native networks. So we're taking that same approach to private networks, and we've identified private networks as a key focus area for Intel. And we're really committed to accelerating the adoption of private networks for our customers and partners. So others in the industry may be very opportunistic. We're being very deliberate about it. I talked about the ecosystem engagement. We feel, and again, I think Hitesh also mentioned this, private networks are not a product play. It's an ecosystem play, right? There's no single point which will get you everything that you need, right? So someone may have a great network but don't have CPEs, may have the CPEs and the network but may need some applications. So by engaging that ecosystem, you can get a lot better outcomes. And Intel has the relationships and the size to activate that ecosystem. Now, also the portfolio. So I mentioned earlier, we go much beyond the chip. So again, we need that end-to-end approach, and we have the tools and frameworks to really implement an end-to-end solution. So we offer not just FlexRAN, we have processors, we have GPUs, we have FPGAs, we have edge solutions. We have ready-to-deploy solutions. I mentioned earlier MRSs and RRKs. So we really allow you to accelerate that time to market by working with us. Now, when it comes to our hardware and software, we have a very strong connection between hardware and software. The teams co-design and work together, and there's that feedback loop to make sure that what we put out to the market is very robust and really is going to work well for our partners. Now, AI and ML is getting a lot of attention right now, and rightly so. We have a lot of reference solutions, trained AI kits to really increase that time to market, reduce that time to market, and increase speeds of deployment. So we have a very extensive partner ecosystem. We have ISVs, we have SI partners, we have device manufacturers. So we really enable that full end-to-end solution. And then partner programs. So we have various partner programs. We have the Inter-Partner Alliance. I mentioned all the MRSs and stuff, but we also provide resources, funding, BKMs to really accelerate that innovation because we do have that strategic focus on private network deployments. So then invariably the question becomes, what's our recommended approach? Well, again, to build upon what Hitesh was saying, we think identify the outcomes. Now, I've laid it out in the sense of today, tomorrow, day after tomorrow. That's not a literal sense, but really to represent, okay, short-term, mid-term, and sort of longish term. Identify the business problem and let that be, the anchor that will solve the issue you're facing. Rethink the role of connectivity to outcomes and really come up with the top use cases that will be addressed by private networks. Then we recommend you engage with your partners that can activate that ecosystem to really map those outcomes to the technology. And then use that to come up with the business case. What's going to be the ROI once your outcomes are achieved? Again, Hitesh mentioned, the company that you work with, $6.5 million in OpEx savings. That's quite substantial. So the business case there will be very compelling if you're paying in the order of like a couple $100,000 for a private network. So Intel is the partner of choice because we can leverage not just our extensive portfolio, but we can engage that ecosystem to really help an enterprise achieve the desired outcomes, enable the use cases, and deploy something that's very, very future-proof in terms of innovation.
Thank you so much, Manav. Let me pull up our next poll question. It's here. We appreciate your responses. We'll hold for approximately 60 seconds. Let me invite Greg to present Dell Technologies perspective.
Hey, appreciate it. Thank you all. Yeah, good morning, everybody. Greg Burrell at Dell Technologies. I actually work over on the federal side, but obviously I have a deep knowledge in inroads into what Dell does in the 5G space. So for most people that are on the webinar, Dell Technologies probably doesn't come to mind when you think 5G. But luckily, with the standards changing to more of a virtualized network function, and the fact that now with 5G technologies, it's not locked into proprietary hardware. You can host most 5G workloads on commercial off-the-shelf servers. That's where Dell's pretty much involved. So we're kind of on the back end of most of the network infrastructure. And we also partner with a lot of folks across the industry, including everybody on this call, to really develop and go to market with validated solutions. So that all starts with obviously the PowerEdge servers that we normally deploy. So we've got both data center centric platforms that can host both the RAN and the core functions, as well as any sort of multi-access edge compute or edge-based use cases, to include ruggedized and NEBS compliant offerings as well on the rugged side. So that's first and foremost. And then in addition, we obviously have a very robust ecosystem of technology partners. We definitely are very key on validation of those partners on Dell hardware, and then obviously getting that out into the market space. So all of our partners that we work with, we have a large lab that's down in Round Rock, Texas, as well as one over in Cork, Ireland, which I'll cover here in a little more detail. But we're very keen on that, of basically having validated solutions that once a customer is interested in taking on a 5G network, a private 5G network, everything's going to work together and play nice. We also support open ecosystem solutions. So Dell is a big proponent of open ecosystems. Having customers not get locked into proprietary hardware or software solutions. That was really key coming out of COVID, because as most people saw, COVID created significant disruptions in global supply chains. So if your wagon is kind of hitched to one particular vendor, you could be locked in and kind of out of luck if we run into another global instance like that, where you can't get your hardware, your software that's required to run your network. And then first and foremost, we also focus on customer requirements. So normally when I get brought into conversations with customers about 5G, yes, they do want the improved metrics and the quality of service that 5G networks bring. But at the end of the day, it's usually tied to a use case. So Dell, along with our partners, we're very keen on helping customers kind of flesh out the use case, because normally that obviously takes into account other tech verticals that maybe the customers aren't thinking about. Like, hey, you're pulling in all this data from sensors. Do you need data storage? Do you need an edge-based platform to crunch, do the analysis, whether it's an AI or ML type application? So Dell is very strong in that space, just like Intel, where they work with a number of partners. So we try to tie all that together and basically give a customer a holistic solution. And then really last, but definitely not least, is how do we simplify the technology solution? So cellular networks are very complicated, especially at scale. Luckily, private networks are a little easier to grapple with. But at the end of the day, cellular technologies as they currently stand, especially in large scale networks, you could have a master's or a PhD in that. And, if you don't know what you're doing, it could take you a decade to get anything to connect to the network. So luckily with the partners that we have on here, we make it pretty simple and straightforward for deployment, and just takes a lot of that guesswork and complication out of that at customers' hands. So go ahead. So I talked about the Open Telecom Systems Lab. The largest one's down in Round Rock, Texas. That's where Dell Technologies, headquarters, mothership is at. And there's a couple different pathways there. So right now it's about a 16,000 square foot facility. They're getting ready to expand that out to about another 10,000 square feet. So it's a dedicated, secure facility. All of our partners can come in and do benchmarking and testing and validation on Dell hardware. We've got all the infrastructure blocks that you see there, whether it's the ruggedized servers that can be thrown out in a storage container out on the edge, or if it's going to be hosted in a data center, we've got all that's there available for our customers to come in and our partners to come in and validate. We've also got RF Faraday cages, so if you've got radios or antennas that you want to benchmark and test, we've got that available well. And as you can see there down in the lower left, those are the couple of different certification paths. So joint certification, that's where Dell and a partner go hand in hand and come out at the end of that with an actual joint certification. Partners can self-certify, so you can come in and use the infrastructure hardware to certify your own software. So a lot of our independent software vendors do that. Solution validation, hey, does this work? Which is obviously tied to proof of concept as well. Or we can just have partners and customers come in and do some demo or training on actual telco infrastructure hardware. And like I spoke about, Dell's big on the 5G Open RAN solution. So obviously GXC plays into that as well as Intel. And basically with that Open RAN architecture, it really opens up the ability to plug and play different partners and vendors into the space. It gives you different architectural deployment options, and they're a little more flexible. especially with disaggregated CU and DU. You can obviously reduce the amount of hardware that's required to deploy on site with some of these more flexible architectures. In addition, Dell works with a number of partners to integrate at the chipset accelerator. So whether that's a separate card or some of like the new chipsets that Intel comes out with that are accelerating telco-specific workloads to offload a lot of that heavy, kind of layer one compute. We integrate all that in the Dell platforms as well. And as you can see at the bottom there, on the Fed side, federal customers are definitely interested in private networks, not only from the ability to control access to that network, but security as well. And like Hema mentioned at the beginning of the brief, security is a key part of that. And Dell ensures that all of our telco solutions are integrated with Zero Trust as well. So we've seen use cases with military-based coverage, naval shipyards, that can extend to smart bases where the customers are trying to reduce, energy consumption, or it can support other use cases like government warehouses, right? So logistics is a big thing in government. Federal government is a large business and machine as it is. So how do we reduce losses and downtime from losing logistical items and stuff as they're in transit, right? We've also seen use cases for border protection and civilian tactical uses. So obviously, no surprise, at least in the U.S., southern border is a big focus area now. But it's a pretty austere area. So how can we leverage our partners and our hardware to go out there and actually set up a private network to connect those Border Patrol agents to not only connect their personal comms, but also all the integrated sensors that they have on the ground. And then obviously for DoD, standalone in-theater deployments, basically taking your network with you, right? So taking and deploying a private network bubble that all your trusted devices can connect to. And that extends not only to forward, but also obviously on campus back in garrison. Next slide. And this is just an example of how we kind of integrate partners, right? So some of our network building blocks. So as you can see, this here is more geared towards Department of Homeland Security, but we can integrate sensors, partners that integrate those sensors, kind of the orchestration piece. And that could be, Intel offerings, that could be GXC. Dejero is a big partner that you'll hear from here shortly. But that all goes into actually getting back into the network itself. And we develop and work through a lot of the technical issues so customers don't have to, like integration with a LEO provider like Starlink or OneWeb. And how do we get this to all work, from the very far edge where these sensors are deployed all the way back through to the core network. Dell is a big component of that ecosystem, and we work with all our partners very closely to make sure that all of these different solutions, because at the end of the day, there's no really one partner that can give you everything that a customer may need or desire in their technical solution. So partnerships are key, and that's why it's great to be on this brief today with some of our partners that we work very closely with in the space. And then last but not least, Dell has developed what we call Private Wireless Orchestrator. So that's kind of a one pane of glass, single pane of glass experience that users can use to really look across the network. So this would kind of take the place of the OSS and BSS in a typical commercial cellular network. And it really just helps the customers have a simple interface to look across the entire network, both on the RAN and the core side, and all the way down to the end user devices, really pinpoint issues or areas that can be improved and really manage the network end to end. Right now, it's benchmarked on cloud-based deployments, but that can be obviously migrated over to like an on-prem deployment as well. So with that, that's all I have. I was fairly quick, and look forward to any questions you may have, and I'll pass it over to Hema for the next speaker.
Thank you. Thank you, Greg. Greg, we have some questions on the Q&A session, but we can take them later. But before we go on to Jahan, I would like to introduce a third poll question. So would appreciate the response. I know, Hitesh, you are already responding, but we will again.
While they're doing that poll, do you want me to answer that one question there real quick? It was Spectrum. So CBRS is typically the default, though a lot of the government customers are looking at either unlicensed Spectrum right now, so stuff that's typically earmarked for military use cases, or they leverage telcos to utilize, spectrum that they're not utilizing in certain spaces. So those could be PAL licenses, which gives enhanced, bandwidth, or it could be some of the spectrum that they're not utilizing. They have in a certain area, but they're not utilizing. So, thanks,
Thank you,
Hema.
Greg. And we'll be closing the poll for this one. We would like to welcome our next panelist, Jahan Kareem. Go ahead, Jahan.
Thanks, Hema, and thank you to all the panelists for a great discussion so far. And good day to everyone that's on the webinar. Appreciate you all joining us today. From a Dejero perspective, I think I'm going to continue to kind of reiterate the common thread that all the panelists have been mentioning, is that being able to provide network capabilities, network technologies, all this innovation, whether it be at the chip side or software level or at the solution level, is all driven by the customer application, or as Hitesh put it, that the problem that needs to be solved, right? The solution that where are we adding value? And I think from a Dejero perspective, you're going to see that the next couple of slides will mostly talk about how are we looking at the customer problem. And one of the key areas, and even one of the poll questions, was around, when people are charting new territories when it comes to private 5G networks or just private cellular networks, which are 5G at the moment, maybe 6G in the near future, what are some of the things that they're running into? I mean, as Greg put it, these are complex areas of technology. Even when it comes to 5G, there's wideband, there's ultra wideband, there's sub 6, gigahertz, there's millimeter wave. There's all these new things that ITs and CIO shops have to deal with, and IT departments have to deal with. I think from a Dejero perspective, I'll kind of just touch on some of the areas that folks have to deal with when it comes to deploying networks. And as you see them illustrated on the diagram, I don't want to reach through each one of them, but I think what's important to highlight here is that Dejero has helped or advised or consulted with customers, partners, and solution providers that may or may not be Dejero to address some of these issues. And I think these are some of the considerations, as Hema said, the slides will be provided after the webinar, that are important to look at when you're actually looking at the aspects of operability, maintenance, and the usefulness of the network when it comes to deploying a private network for your applications. So Hema, next slide, please. Just to kind of give everyone a quick overview on what Dejero is and what our core competency is we focus on bringing reliable connectivity to the edge by making it provider and technology agnostic, and being able to blend together multiple types of transports to create a single seamless network. And the value of this is going to be highlighted in the next couple of slides. But essentially, by bringing together different types of accesses, whether they be wireline, whether they be wireless, and on the wireless side, maybe cellular, maybe SATCOM, maybe microwave, we realize that 90% of the time when you're going into a customer environment, you're dealing with some type of incumbent architecture. Human beings are, they're resourceful, right? They figured out how to solve their problems with technologies that exist today, and they will continue to figure out how to solve problems that are going to be with technologies that are coming up in the near future or in the mid horizons. And what Dejero intends to provide to our customers is a seamless platform to leverage their existing solutions and the existing capabilities, along with the possibility of upcoming technologies, just as private 5G networks or SATCOM networks that are a big conversation these days, with especially low Earth orbit technologies being very prevalent. That being said, I will conclude this slide with, if you think of Dejero, you are basically looking at a network of networks. And happy to any questions around how we do the low-level things, but I just wanted to highlight that we're enabling a seamless network that's multi-transport and multi-provider. Next slide, please. So again, emphasizing customer applications, Hitesh talked about being able to deploy a private cellular network or a private cell tower at a location where it's really difficult to get communications. Looking at it from a customer's perspective, Dejero is trying to solve that problem for those customers, where you may have a mining site with 5,000 endpoints, you may have a construction site with 100 endpoints. In this case, we're talking about a construction site, but we do understand that even in our customers' areas of operation or their site level deployments, there may be sites that have private cellular networks deployed. There may be sites that there may not be private cellular networks deployed, but being able to coordinate back with the enterprise, being able to coordinate with other remote sites is very critical. So in this particular example, where Dejero is bringing value is to be able to tie together those remote deployments using Dejero's technology by bringing in various different transports seamlessly and supporting that local private cellular network, which doesn't seem like just an experiment anymore or an initial deployment, because you can seamlessly bring it into the enterprise environment. So the customer is not only deploying a next generation technology, they're seamlessly integrating into the picture of today by using Dejero and by extending the enterprise data sets and applications and collaboration tools to the edge. So that kind of highlights the use case from a Dejero perspective for a construction site. That's actually one of the key areas where we're deploying. We're seeing the deployments of private networks where there's more collaboration and communications required, and construction site seems to be a primary candidate for that at the moment. Next slide, please. And to kind of look at it another way, this slide is really simplified, but what we wanted to highlight here is, again, talking about going into customer environments, you're typically not looking at greenfield environments. So not only is Dejero providing the ability to backhaul a local private network, we also have the ability to provide edge access utilizing private and public networks. So the customers, if they have access to public networks at a certain location, can segregate their application traffic, can segregate their payloads, can prioritize certain traffic over certain networks while still optimizing their total cost of ownership, as Hitesh mentioned, right? So if they've got an existing solution, they can continue to maybe ramp down that solution and ramp up a private networks deployment while they're still running their operations. You don't have to shut down your business, and we all understand the impact of downtime in an enterprise environment. The ability to extend the private network seamlessly to the edge, where in a current environment, maybe Wi-Fi, maybe public cellular networks, maybe something else like a mesh network, we can come in seamlessly and provide that cutover to the private network and help the customer navigate that. And again, Dejero's ability to provide that seamlessly within public networks, private networks, and multiple types of networks really improves the efficiency, the reliability, the bandwidth, the coverage from a customer perspective. And we really truly think that's where the value lies on the enterprise side. And I think that concludes my slides, Hema. Back to you.
Thank you. Before we open for the Q&A, let me have one last poll question. Thank you all for the responses. Let's start with the Q&A. I think there is one open question out here. I don't know who that question is targeted to, like which panelists you are asking that question. If you can please specify that in the Q&A, that would be good. Can you offer reliable connectivity in large bodies of water? Jahan, that's a question for you.
Yeah, happy to answer that, Hema. So we actually do provide, again, in the public safety domain, as you can imagine, customers have areas of operation that are land-based. They've got areas of operation that are aerial, especially with drones and other fixed-wing assets that are deploying. And of course, there's maritime assets, both on the enterprise side and on the public safety side, where customers are using our solutions to, again, make their comms capability more resilient. So when you talk about large bodies of water, yes, we have customers utilizing our solutions today to have not just literal water access or communications access, which is shallow water access to comms. They're using our comms capability to provide blue water access, which is deep water access, and then have that not only available in those areas, but seamlessly traverse between blue water or deep water operations, shallow water operations, and onshore operations. So yes, in a nutshell, we have customers utilizing our platform in those environments. Hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you, Jahan. We have some more questions on the Q&A. Hitesh, do you want to? I know you already responded to a few of them offline, but there are some more questions. Let me know if you or somebody else on the panel.
Yeah.
Like to
No,
address.
I'll get to them. So Steve says an edge device such as a camera with 5G encoder more seamlessly between two cells without a glitch handover. Can an edge device? Yes, 100%. We've actually gotten use cases today that use a brand name camera. Maybe I can name the brand. It's pretty common. Verkada cameras. They use our solution to plop in our SIM cards into the cameras. Verkada is just one brand. We work with a few other ones as well. And now these cameras are literally free to go plop them wherever you want to plop them, and you have security coverage. So it works seamlessly, and if you're thinking about transitioning between cells, that's also very well supported. There's some details about our solution that I haven't gone into yet because we are still in the final steps of kind of formalizing it. But maybe in a future session, right? But we do have a concept that makes 5G even more efficient, which sort of circulates around a front hall multiplexer, if you know that as a concept. So it's still something that we are buttoning up, like I mentioned, and it'll be in one of our near-term releases. But the whole concept there is to facilitate use cases like this one in 5G, where the cell radius, just because of the physics of the wavelengths and the frequency bands, are not that long range, and we don't want too many handovers or ping ponging to happen. So that's definitely a feature on the product. Second question is, and does that include the mesh node? Not just yet, but yeah, eventually mesh node will also be fully up to speed with all of those features. Tom Gilly, does mesh deployment reduce available data rate for devices? Not in a very significant manner. I mean, of course, if you do multiple hops, then you start seeing some impact of it. But for the most part, what we've realized or seen in tests, and our customers have told us, is that they don't really see much of a difference for what they want to do. And part of it is because we've tested it and we've optimized it specifically for that type of deployment. Like we've tweaked certain stack protocol to make sure that there is the penalty for having a wireless in, wireless out is minimal. And literally that is our intellectual property, right? Like the box, the mesh node is not a dumb box that's taking in something and spitting out the same thing out. It is where we use the concepts of anti-noise and things of that nature that allow us to process the incoming signal if it's deteriorated due to reflections and refractions, make it a more richer, more stronger signal, and propagate it further. So the impact is very minimal in our tests.
I don't think we have any additional questions. I think we are also on time. So anything else, Hitesh, Manav, Jahan, if you want to add before we close the webinar?
I think it's great to be on this panel. It's great to see this similar message being resonated about the partnership and the ecosystem. So it's great to be on this, and look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you, Manav.
Yeah, I'll say humble minds think alike. So I appreciate the panel, you, Hema, putting this together, and 100% all props to all of the audience that stayed along through the journey with us this whole hour. Time, like I started with, is the most precious resource, and we appreciate you sharing, some of your precious resource with us today morning. If you wanted to get in touch with any of us, Hema is kind enough to plop our details onto the screen. So be happy to talk to you.
Absolutely. And all the slides that we presented today, along with the poll results, will be uploaded on our website and will be available to download in the next 24 hours. So thank you again for joining us. We really appreciate your time. Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, you guys.